It's been over 240 days since the last time we watched the Fighting Irish take the football field, but after 8 long months, the wait is almost over. It's officially game week.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, and I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and I'm thrilled to have you here on Monday, August 26th, and thanks for starting your week right here by making this your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, plus you can watch every episode on YouTube as well. Please like and subscribe if you are watching on YouTube, and rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast if that is how you're tuning in today. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate GM. Ultimate College Football HC is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. Folks, it's finally here. It's game week for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The season will officially kick off on Saturday night in prime time against the Texas A&M Aggies, and we have got a lot of exciting stuff in store for you to get you ready for the opener and the season to come. So Pete Sampson from The Athletic helped me kick off the official season preview last Friday, and we're going to keep that rolling here throughout this week. Today, I'm going to do a full game-by-game breakdown of the entire schedule before I give out my official record prediction at the end. Then Luke Smith is going to join tomorrow's show for our annual preseason awards, which is one of my favorite things we do every single year. Then on Wednesday and Thursday, I'm going to start to really dive into the matchup against the Aggies, and I'm hoping to have some A&M insiders come on to help me out with that. Then on Friday, I'm going to react to the first 2 episodes of Here Come the Irish, the Hard Knock style documentary that will air on Peacock. Plus, I'm going to answer a few mailbag questions as well. So get your questions in if you want to be on Friday's show. I won't be able to take as many as normal because we have a documentary to talk about, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Big week in store for you, but we have to begin this schedule breakdown, preview, all of that with the season opener at the 20th ranked Texas A&M Aggies this Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Right now, Texas A&M is favored by 2.5. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this game today because I'll have 2 full episodes devoted to this game later on in the week. But here's a couple things that you need to know. Mike Elko brought in 26 players in the transfer portal this offseason to replace a lot of the guys who left after Jimbo Fisher was let go. And if you look at the matchups, I think Notre Dame's defense has a big advantage over Texas A&M's offense. But as I've said before, I am very concerned about how the Notre Dame offensive line is going to hold up against Nick Scorton, Shamar Turner, and Shamar Stewart. They are really good, and I just don't think Notre Dame's offensive line is going to be that good in this game. They might get better as the season goes on, but this is a tough task to start the season with. What we expect is 2 brand new starters on the left side of that offensive line. But I do believe that Notre Dame has the advantage with the skill players, and I think that they're going to have to hit on some explosive plays in this game, and they're going to have to win the turnover battle. I think that is ultimately what this game is going to come down to. Who wins the turnover battle and who has more plays of 20 or more yards, because I don't think either offense is going to have a ton of drives where they have 8 to 10 plays or anything like that where it's long and sustained. I think you're going to have to hit some big plays and then take advantage of those by scoring touchdowns, and I think that is going to be what decides the game. I like the Irish in a rock fight. It might not be a whole lot of fun, but just get the win. Because I think if you win this game, the schedule really opens up. But if you lose this game, the path to the playoff is going to be a lot harder because there's just going to be so much added pressure on every game throughout the rest of the regular season. Okay, week 2, Northern Illinois, home opener. The Huskies finished 6-6 in the regular season last year, and they won their bowl game against Arkansas State, so they finished the season with a winning record. They play a lot of Power 5 opponents. Every year they get at least 2 games in. Last year they upset Boston College in the season opener, but then they got throttled by Nebraska a couple weeks later, and we know Boston College wasn't that good, but then again, neither was Nebraska, and they still handled them by a final score of 35-11. Since 2017, Northern Illinois is 3-11 against the Power 5. Their offense was bad last season. They were 79th in the country in points per game. And right now, it doesn't look like they have their quarterback figured out or anyone at wide receiver. But I could see this game being like a little bit tight in the first half. It has all the makings of a letdown game for Notre Dame after they put so much into the season opener against Texas A&M. So if they're able to pull that out, Then they have to come home and play Northern Illinois. They probably aren't going to be as up for that as they would for a normal home opener. And it kind of reminds me of 2018. Notre Dame beat Michigan in the season opener. It was a huge, huge win for the program. And then they came out fully asleep against Ball State. And I think Julian Love even admitted that, they didn't prepare as hard as they needed to in that game. And it almost cost them. So, again, I think Notre Dame is going to run away with this game in the second half, but don't be surprised if it's a bit of a dogfight early on because Notre Dame didn't come 100% ready to play. Okay, September 14th at Purdue, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. If this were a night game, I'd probably be really worried because historically things get weird when Notre Dame plays Purdue on the road at night. Just think about 2013 and 2009 when Jimmy Clausen had to find Kyle Rudolph in the end zone in the last play of the game for Notre Dame to win that one. But Purdue is entering year 2 of the Ryan Walters era after a 4-8 start last season. Walters was a great defensive coordinator at Illinois, built one of the best defenses in all of college football. But last year, the Boilermakers were awful on defense. They were tied for 98th in the country in points per game allowed. They basically gave up 30 points per game, and they lost their best defensive player, Nick Scorton, to Texas A&M in the transfer portal. According to Pro Football Focus, Purdue finished 131st in the country in coverage grades and 126th in receptions of over 20 yards allowed. I have to imagine they are going to improve on that this season, especially under a defensive-minded head coach. Offensively, they brought in Graham Harrell to be the offensive coordinator. He used to be the offensive coordinator at USC in West Virginia. And even though he's more of an air raid guy, they actually ran the ball more than they threw it last season, which is a bit of a change. Hudson Card is their quarterback. Remember when we thought that Hudson Card was going to be the quarterback at Notre Dame? Well, it was a good thing that he wasn't because he was Quinn Ewers' backup at Texas, and then he played pretty well in relief against Alabama in that game when Quinn Ewers went down with an injury, and I think that his stock went way up. Also, he was a top recruit coming out of high school, but he was basically average to below average last year, only 2,387 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. They added a bunch of unproven players in the transfer portal, so it's tough to figure out how good or bad this team is going to be. I think they're going to come ready to play because, this is a big in-state rivalry, even though it doesn't feel as much as a rivalry as it used to. I think Notre Dame's going to win this game by double digits, but don't be surprised if Purdue puts up a bit of a fight early on. Okay, September 21st, Notre Dame hosts the Miami, Ohio Redhawks at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Shout out to the Redhawks, man. I've visited this school probably 20 times in college because a bunch of my high school friends went there. I can tell you they are known for their partying, not necessarily their football in Oxford, Ohio. But Chuck Martin and company had a really solid season last year. He's entering his 11th season with the Redhawks, which is pretty nuts, and last year was his best year. They won 11 games. They won the MAC championship. They have come a long way after going 0-12 the year before Martin got there. And they have a tough schedule this year, especially to start. They've got Northwestern and Cincinnati before Notre Dame plays them. So the good thing for Notre Dame is they'll probably get a good look of what they're going to see when Miami comes to town. And last year, they won with their defense. They finished with the 8th ranked scoring defense in the country. They allowed just 15.93 points per game. That is one spot behind what Notre Dame finished last year. Now, obviously, the competition is a little bit different, but that is how they won, and that is how they're going to try to win this season. Matt Solopek is a preseason All-American, according to Phil Steele. He was MAC Defensive Player of the Year last year. He had 143 tackles. 143. That's an insane number. He's really good. And it's really just a question of, can their offense do enough? Because they've got quarterback Brett Gabbert. He's been around for an eternity. He actually started his playing career back in 2019, and he was good for them last season, but then he got hurt, so the stats aren't great. But if he's healthy, I think this offense should be solid. They have a pretty experienced offensive line, and 2 of their players are preseason all-conference on that offensive line. I'm pretty familiar with this team because I started an online dynasty with some of my coworkers, and the team I selected, because we had to pick a Group 5 team, was Miami of Ohio. So they've got some players there. Don't be surprised if this game is still tight in the second half, but ultimately talent is going to win out, and Notre Dame should win this game by double digits as well. Okay, we got a lot more games to get to, so coming up after this, will Notre Dame be able to exact revenge against the Louisville Cardinals? Hey, Irish fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you are going to love just as much as I do, Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of Notre Dame? From recruiting players and hiring your coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? Here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Irish listeners. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the app stores. That's Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. Okay, up next, Notre Dame hosts the Louisville Cardinals on September 21st at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, and right now, the Irish are favored by 9.5 on FanDuel. This is going to be the Irish wear green game, so everyone in the crowd is going to be wearing green. I don't know if Notre Dame is going to wear the same green jerseys that they wore last year against Ohio State. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but the game is also going to be on Peacock, which is kind of funny because this is one of Notre Dame's biggest home games of the year, but it's going to be difficult for some fans to watch it. There's really nothing we can do about Peacock anymore. Like, we can complain about it all we want. It's not going anywhere. And now all the other teams in the Big Ten, they're going to have to deal with it as well. But back to this game. We know that Notre Dame got absolutely embarrassed against Louisville last season. And look, Louisville was pretty good. They finished 10-4, but it was Jeff Brom's first season back as head coach. And this was like the first real big win under Brom. He's the, guy coming home. He played there, grew up there, all that stuff. The crowd was ready for it, and Notre Dame was not in that game. So Notre Dame should be ready to go this season. And if they're not, that is just going to be a black eye on the coaching staff because they just kind of dominated Notre Dame, especially in the second half there. Even though Notre Dame was winning at one point in the third quarter, it just really went off the rails after that. And the defensive line on Louisville wreaked havoc against Notre Dame last season. The Irish were like trying to figure out a new offensive line rotation during the game. It was just a mess, and they were not ready to play. But Louisville returns a lot of guys on their defense again this year. Ashton Giolotti is back, as well as Mason Rager. Those guys really frustrated Notre Dame's offensive line all night. Plus, they've got Quincy Riley, who's one of the best cornerbacks in the ACC. A lot of people thought these guys would leave for the NFL draft. They decided to come back, and they are some guys that Notre Dame actually did not match up well with last year, and that includes with Joe Alt at left tackle. I remember there was a couple plays where Giolotti just blew by him, and it was really shocking to see. So this is going to be a tough task for this Notre Dame offensive line, but Louisville's offense should be an issue. I think they're going to take a step back. They've got Tyler Shuck as their quarterback. He transferred in from Texas Tech. At one point, he was a highly rated recruit, but he has had a bunch of injuries throughout his career. Started at Oregon, then went to Tech, and now he's at Louisville. So I'm not really impressed by him or anything he has done in his college career, but then again, I was not impressed by Jack Plummer, and he went out there and he beat Notre Dame. The running backs who dominated Notre Dame last year in the NFL, Jawar Jordan and Grendo are both in the NFL now. Their biggest addition in the transfer portal was wide receiver Colin Lacey from Southern Alabama, but he suffered a broken collarbone in the preseason. He is likely going to be out for the game, so that is a huge issue for that Louisville offense. I will say, Jeff Brom is so smart. He's such an offensive mastermind that I think they're going to figure out a way to put some points up on the board against this really good Notre Dame defense. But I think Notre Dame is going to come out ready to go, and they should put their foot on the gas early and make sure that Louisville has no chance. But in the past, Notre Dame has just really struggled against Louisville. Just think about that game back in 2020 when Notre Dame almost lost that team, and that team was not good at all. So I like the Irish here by 2 touchdowns. But who knows? This game could definitely go down to the wire as well. So then October 5th, Notre Dame has a bye, and then coming off that bye, they have Stanford at home at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Notre Dame absolutely destroyed Stanford last season after a slow start. They had 3 turnovers in the first half, but still won the game 56-23. Audric Esme ran for a career-high 238 yards in that one, plus 4 touchdowns in his last game with the Irish. And honestly, probably could have ran for more if they decided to keep him in. He could have probably broken the record for most rushing yards in a single game. Stanford does bring back a lot of players, but frankly, none of them are particularly scary other than Alec Aomanor. He is the wide receiver who had over 1,000 receiving yards last year, and he famously had 294 receiving yards against Travis Hunter in Colorado on that Friday night game when they came back from being down, I think it was 29-0, and they really just were like, all right, we're just going to throw it to Ellick every single play. Doesn't matter who's covering him, and that worked. That's how they won that game. Last year, Notre Dame really keyed on him, and A.O. Manor did not do that much against Benjamin Morrison. So I don't really think that Stanford is going to put up much of a fight in this one either. Their running back, Cedric Irvin, is a former Notre Dame commit, so maybe he comes out and he's ready to go. And their offense is going to do a bunch of tricky stuff. They run a lot of misdirection, reverse, trick plays, things like that. They did that last year against Notre Dame and had some success early on, but they just don't have enough talent on either side of the ball to scare me. So in a way, this could be like a get-right game for the Notre Dame offense. They have a pretty tough start to the year going up against Texas A&M and a tricky MAC team in Miami of Ohio, who had a really good defense last year, and then a Louisville defense who I also think is going to be really good, but then they get Stanford. They should be able to move the ball at will against them, and hopefully that is going to give them momentum to score at will the rest of the season, because then the next week they've got Georgia Tech and they play them at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. And I got to say, this game feels a lot different now than it did this time last week, because Georgia Tech upset the 10th ranked Florida State Seminoles 24-21 on Saturday in Ireland of the week 0 game. And they kind of dominated that game. Even though the score doesn't really tell that story, they only won by 3 points, but they absolutely dominated Florida State in the trenches, and I don't think anyone saw that coming. They did it on the ground. They had 190 rushing yards, plus some well-timed big plays from Haynes King. The back-breaking Haynes King turnover never happened in this game, although it almost happened twice when he fumbled the snap. But he made some plays with his legs that I thought were really impressive, and he had a couple really big-time throws. Like there was one play where Georgia Tech had 3rd and 12. He slid in the pocket, had a guy coming right at him, and then he did like a sidearm throw, found the wide receiver in a tight window for a huge first down that led to a score on that drive. So I was really impressed by him. So I think they're absolutely going to be ready in this game. Defensively, they had 7 tackles for loss against Florida State. They were in the backfield all day long. So Florida State never really tried to push him vertically. I don't really know much about Georgia Tech secondary, but I was just so thoroughly impressed by what they did on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. This team is a direct reflection of their head coach, Brent Key. He's a former offensive lineman. I laughed out loud in his post-game press conference when he was like, run the ball. Like, this guy is as old school as it gets, and this team is going to be ready to play in this game. Even though it's technically a home game for Notre Dame, it's going to be played in Atlanta, Georgia Tech's backyard. And even though Georgia Tech doesn't have the most rabid fan base in the world, they are going to be up and ready for this game. So Notre Dame is going to have to show up and be ready to play as well. But I think ultimately, Haynes King is going to commit enough turnovers against this Notre Dame defense for the Irish to escape with the win. Like I said, it almost happened against Florida State. It didn't. If it did, we're talking about this game in a completely different light because a couple bounces went their way there. So I like Notre Dame to win, but I do think that it's going to be close. Okay, October 26th, Notre Dame plays Navy at MetLife Stadium at noon. The Navy game. Notre Dame absolutely handled the midshipmen in Ireland last season, 42-3. It was Brian Newberry's first game as the head coach after he was the defensive coordinator for the previous 4 seasons, and it was just a thorough domination by Notre Dame on both sides of the ball. Navy did not really improve all that much as the season went along, even though they finished 5-7. They finished 125th in points per drive last year. They're hoping to improve under a new offensive coordinator, Drew Koenig, who is the head coach at Mercer. Their defense was actually okay last year. Like, they only allowed 22.42 points per game, which is tied for 37th in the country. But even then, Notre Dame still moved the ball at will. They were hitting him over the top. Jaden Greathouse had 2 touchdowns. Notre Dame ran the ball on him as well. So it makes sense that the defense improved as the year went on. Newberry's a defensive-minded head coach. And I have to imagine that they're going to be a little bit better on offense this season. But Notre Dame should dominate them again. So when you look at this 4-game stretch here, it starts off hard with Louisville, and then they have a bye, and then an easy game against Stanford, and then a potentially tricky matchup against Georgia Tech. Like, I'm not one of those people who looks at that Georgia Tech game and is like, oh, well, now this team is going to be competing for the ACC championship. I don't think that's the case. I still think that they have some holes to fill, but when the entire country is watching one game, there's going to be some extreme takes after that. So I definitely think Georgia Tech is going to be a good team. It's going to be a tougher matchup than I thought it would be last week, but still, Notre Dame should win that game, especially after 2 easy weeks with the bye in Stanford, and then they should just absolutely dominate Navy in what is probably going to be a very sleepy game in MetLife at noon. So at this point, I've got Notre Dame 8-0 with 4 games left. So when we come back, I'm going to break down those 4 games, give you my official record prediction, and look at Notre Dame's college football playoff outlook. Today's episode is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. 5-Hour Energy fixes tired fast. Whether you have a long list to do for work or a long list of DIY projects to tackle at home, take a 5-Hour Energy shot so you can check everything off your list. If you're like me, you always have a large list of things to do, whether it be at home or at work. But when you get supplies for the project or when you're planning ahead for your work week, do not forget the most essential supply, which is a 5-Hour Energy shot. With 0 sugar and a convenient portable size, it is the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape berry, and more. There is a flavor for everyone. You can try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it is delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders, but that's code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Once Notre Dame is through with Navy, they have a well-timed bye at the start of November, and then the currently ranked 10th ranked Florida State Seminoles come to town for a night game, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, Notre Dame Stadium. And look, it might be easy to write off Florida State completely after what we just watched in Ireland, but I think that's a little bit premature. Notre Dame was favored by 4.5 against the Seminoles last week on FanDuel, but now that line is unavailable because I think a lot of people still don't know what to think about Florida State after that big upset at the hands of Georgia Tech. And yes, they lost, but still, there's a lot of talent on this team, and this is a group that lives in the transfer portal, and Mike Norvell is still a good coach. So odds are they are going to be a lot better in November than they are right now. Patrick Payton played really poorly in the game against Georgia Tech, but he's put up some good numbers in his career. Last year, he had 14.5 tackles for loss, 44 pressures, and 10 pass breakups. That's an insane amount for a defensive lineman, but he was just invisible in that game against Georgia Tech. I don't really know what to make of it, but there is some talent on this defense. And even though they lost in the trenches, it wasn't like Georgia Tech was throwing the ball on this group at all. So I think this defense is going to improve as the year goes on. The real question that I have about Florida State is what is going to happen at quarterback, because it was very evident that they did not trust DJ Uiagalelei at all in this game. It was his first game with the Seminoles after he transferred from Oregon State, and he averaged negative yards per attempt in the first half. He only had 2 incompletions, and he had 78 passing yards, but it was all stuff like dink and dunk down the field because they just did not trust him to throw the ball downfield. Now, part of that has to do with the fact that none of their wide receivers were getting open. This was a question about this team going into the season because they lost Keon Coleman, and if you watch this game, yes, DJ wasn't really pushing the ball downfield, and he had some errant throws, but it wasn't like he was missing open guys. Like Georgia Tech secondary was putting the clamps on these dudes, and I don't know if that says more about Georgia Tech or the fact that Florida State just does not have that many good wide receivers. So if Florida State is out of the ACC championship hunt by this game, and they're not really in the hunt for the playoff, I actually think they're going to go with a different quarterback in this game. Brock Glenn is the backup. He's a redshirt freshman. Florida State fans are excited about him, and if Florida State doesn't have a chance to make the college football playoff or the ACC championship or anything like that, what is the point of playing DJ Uiagalelei, who's going to be gone after this season, when you could play one of your younger guys? I think that it's a real possibility, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Florida State is going to rebound. They're going to figure things out, and they're still going to be in the mix by the time they come to South Bend. So it's going to be a big game. Big-time atmosphere in Notre Dame Stadium. It's the only home game that they play at night this year, and it is going to be a great environment for the Irish. And one thing that I think people should remember about this game, Florida State does not play, they do not like playing Notre Dame in November. I still remember that game in 2018. It was senior night. I think it had snowed a bunch in South Bend. It was really, really cold, and Florida State was terrible at the time. And Notre Dame skill players came out on the field for pregame warmups without a shirt on. Meanwhile, all the players on Florida State looked like Ralphie from A Christmas Story. They were so bundled up, and they just did not want to be there for that game. Notre Dame dominated them in that one. Florida State actually put up more of a fight in 2020 in the COVID year. Notre Dame still handled them in that game as well. So Florida State has not had a lot of success coming to South Bend in recent years, and I don't think they're going to have success in this game either. Notre Dame is going to win this game, and I think by the second half, it could potentially, they could run away with it, but if they're still in it at the very end, it wouldn't surprise me because, again, they're going to be fighting for their lives by this point in time. All right, next up, Notre Dame hosts Virginia, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. It's senior day, and it's the Chris Tyree Bowl, I guess you could call it. But look, Virginia, they just have not been very good. Tony Elliott is entering his third season as the head coach of the Cavaliers, and he might be on the hot seat by the time this game is played. Like, they only have 6 wins total his first 2 seasons. 4 of their 9 losses last year came by a combined 10 points, so they were in a lot of games. But I just think if you go through, like, you're not going to improve all that much. They do return a lot of players. They're going to be better this year. It's just a matter of how much. I really think that Chris Tyree is going to be the focal point of their offense, and we know he can be explosive. We know he can make some big plays. But look, he left so that he could be the focal point, whereas if he was on this Notre Dame team, he would absolutely be a player. He'd be a contributor. But if you look at that receiver room now, he would not be getting nearly the same level of production this year than he did last year. Plus, he was close to home. So I'm happy for Chris Tyree. I love what he did for Notre Dame and the fact that he was willing to move from running back to wide receiver. But if that is the focal point of your offense, you're probably not going to have a ton of success. I really don't see them putting up much of a fight in this game. And Notre Dame has done better on senior day in recent years. I think they're going to win this one going away. All right, then we got the Shamrock Series game at Yankee Stadium. Army, 7 o'clock Eastern. I'll be honest, this game does not really move the needle for me at all. I mean, I like the Shamrock Series jerseys, didn't love the numbers, but the color was cool. Army is entering their 11th season with Jeff Monken at the helm. He's done a good job, winning record, 70-55 overall. They've won 6 of the last 8 against Navy, and that's really the main focus of that football program. And it sounded like Army was trying to get out of this game for a few years, but the administration basically made him do it. They didn't want to miss an opportunity to play Notre Dame. And they did lose a ton of guys from last year's team, so it's difficult to project like what this Army team is going to look like this year. They did run an interesting offense last year. They ran a spread option, so it was a new wrinkle on the triple option that we're accustomed to seeing, but they still ran it 75% of the time according to Pro Football Focus. So they're still going to run it a lot, even though it's going to be a little bit different than Navy. So Notre Dame is going to end up playing 2 triple option offenses in the span of a month. And according to Jamie Uyeyama of Irish Sports Daily, this Army defense did not make any big plays last year. They finished 129th and Havoc rate last season on defense. So Notre Dame should be able to dominate them on both sides of the ball. And considering, again, this is Notre Dame's second time against the option, like, this game should never even be close. It's at Yankee Stadium. It should be a fun time for those in attendance, but yeah, I wish this game was something else. Okay, last game of the regular season at USC. Probably going to be a primetime game. And right now, Notre Dame is only favored by 3.5 on FanDuel, and I actually think that makes sense because if anyone tells you they know what to expect from USC this season, they're lying to you because who the hell knows with this group? Their win total is 7.5. on FanDuel because they have an absolutely brutal schedule. They've got LSU at a neutral site in week 1. They play at Michigan, home against Wisconsin, at Minnesota, home against Penn State, and at Washington before playing Notre Dame. Those are all very tough games. So I think there's 2 ways this season goes for USC. They surprise a lot of people. They still probably lose a couple games. They won't really be in the hunt for the college football playoff, but maybe they finish 9-3 with a very tough schedule, and that would be really good for them and could provide some momentum going into the what would be year 4 of the Lincoln Riley era. Or they get dominated by these teams and they fold completely, and then they're just basically a shell of themselves by the time that Notre Dame plays them. I really don't know, okay? I think that they will be better than people expect. And I know they lost Caleb Williams, but they're going to be fine in offense. Like Lincoln Riley, it doesn't matter who they got out there. They're going to put up 30 points a game, and they actually do have playmakers. Miller Moss was really good in that Holiday Bowl against Louisville. I was actually at that game. He lit it up, 6 touchdown passes, and might have deterred any transfer quarterback from coming over to USC because of that performance. Am I saying that he's going to be in the Heisman race this year? No, but he's solid, and he's got Lincoln Riley calling the plays. Their offense is going to move the ball. They've got Zachariah Branch, who is one of the most exciting players in all of college football, was really a problem against Notre Dame last year, even though we weren't even sure if he was going to play in that game. He had that big punt return, set up a score for them, but their offensive line was awful, and I think that's going to be a big question mark this year as well. So I think Notre Dame will have a big advantage there. When you talk about this USC team, you just have to wonder, what is their defense going to look like? They brought in a brand new staff after Lincoln Riley allowed Alex Grinch to sabotage his coaching career for far too long, and he added one of the best defensive coordinators in college football, Danton Lynn. He was the defensive coordinator at crosstown rival UCLA, built one of the best defenses in the country last year. Now he's with the Trojans, so we know their scheme is going to be a lot better, but I'm just not sure they added enough playmakers on defense to be that improved this season. But historically, Notre Dame usually struggles on the road against USC, even in USC's down years. And considering I think Notre Dame is going to be undefeated going in, their playoff spot will be secure. It's really just going to be a matter of, are they going to be the 5th seed, or are they going to be like the 7th, 8th, maybe even 9th seed? So there's still going to be a lot on the line for Notre Dame in this game. And I think they're going to win this game, but I think that it could be close just because it usually is tricky playing this team. And I think that USC is going to be better than most people expect. So there is going to be a lot on the line for USC, even if it's not like a playoff berth or anything like that, because they're going to want to build momentum after a really, really disappointing season last year. And I think it's going to be a tough game. But Notre Dame's going to pull it out. They're going to finish the regular season undefeated. And even though I feel like they're going to go undefeated, it might surprise some people. It is not always going to be pretty. I think it's going to be really close against Texas A&M. I think Miami of Ohio is going to be tricky. Purdue maybe even has a chance to be annoying. Georgia Tech is going to be a close game. Florida State could be close. And USC are all going to be close games, in my opinion. It's going to feel a lot like 2018 when Notre Dame went undefeated, but they had their backs against the wall a lot. That team almost lost to Ball State. They almost lost to Vanderbilt. They were in a tight game against Northwestern on the road at the very end. They almost lost to Pitt. They were in a dogfight against USC. But guess what? That team finished undefeated. And I think that is what's going to happen this year, because I think this is a special team with a really talented coaching staff. And even though there are going to be opportunities for letdowns, and there's going to be some games where the other team might have an advantage in one of the position groups, ultimately Notre Dame's talent is going to win out, and that is why they are going to win every single regular season game. So then we get to the college football playoff. They're the 5 seed. They should beat up on whatever group of 5 team they have in the first round. It could be App State, Memphis, maybe it's Liberty. They should dominate them. It's going to be a home game in South Bend in late December. It's probably going to be cold. It's going to be miserable. I have no interest in going to that game, to be honest, but it's going to be a really cool atmosphere for Notre Dame to host a playoff game. I think they're going to win that game easily. Then they're going to have to play a team like Penn State, Missouri, Miami in the second round of the college football playoff, and I think that they should win that game as well. So now Notre Dame's got 2 playoff wins under their belt, and they are headed to the college football playoff semifinal. Unfortunately, I think that is where this dream season is going to come to an end at the hands of Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, maybe Oregon, because I think this is a really, really talented Notre Dame team with a major flaw in the offensive line. And even though they're going to be improved on the offensive line by the time they would get to the college football playoff semifinal, if they make it to that point, whatever team they go up against is going to have an absolutely elite pass rush. And the teams I mentioned, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, Texas, those teams have recruited better than Notre Dame in recent years. They've been more aggressive in the transfer portal. And I think that by the time these teams get to what would be their 15th game of the year, depth is going to be so important. Even though Marcus Freeman has drastically improved the depth of this team and this program, I think that it's still a step behind those teams that I just mentioned. So I think that ultimately Notre Dame is going to finish 14-1 with a loss in the college football playoff semifinal. And look, it would be disappointing at the time, but if they go 14-1 this season, that would be an incredible season, one hell of a ride. But look, it starts with week 1. They have absolutely got to beat Texas A&M, and it is going to be a tough one. It's going to be close. And if they lose that game, it's going to be really tough the rest of the way, because there's going to be so much added pressure on every single regular season game the rest of the way on Marcus Freeman, on the team to win, because 10-2 is a lot different than 11-1 in that college football playoff standings. And I think a win against Texas A&M is going to propel them to an undefeated regular season, and it should be a lot of fun, man. I can't remember the last time I predicted Notre Dame to go 12-0. I think last year I predicted 11-1, which obviously wasn't right. The year before that, I think 10-2, not right. But the year before that, in 2021, I was on air, predicted 11-1 with the loss to Cincinnati. So I've been right before. I've been wrong, but I think I'm due, and I think the Irish are going to go undefeated. That is a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning with Luke Smith for our preseason award show. It's so much fun. You're going to want to tune in for that. Best way to just stay up to date with everything we do on the show is by subscribing on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. For your second listen, check out the Locked On College Football Podcast with Spencer McLaughlin, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.